LIGHTBOB TV. Today we're on episode 3 on Thursday. We're going to talk about design. And today's episode is very particular for me, and I'm going to start with a story because I want to talk to you about leadership and where does leadership start, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So basically, when I graduate from Parson, I got my first job offer from an architectural firm. They had a big contract with a client, and they had multiple locations. And the client asked for a specific, not a specific, but a lighting designer, in-house lighting designer, and they didn't have one. And at the time, I was in Montreal, and there was two people in Montreal that were doing lighting design, and I was one of them. And I was probably the only one that went to Parson. So working in the architecture, because I know another of my friend that was a lighting designer for Parson, she was working in the theater world. So she was not interested, although she did her master in lighting design. She was working in the theater world, and I was very dedicated to architectural lighting design. So during the interview, I go through all the process, and I meet everybody, and then it comes down to the pay. And at the time, I was making about $60,000 in my other job. I was director of a design school, and then they say, well, how much do you want? And I said, well, I want 100,000. That's the minimum. And of course, like they were all surprised, and they said, well, for 100,000, I can get 3 architects. And I say to them, I said, well, 3 architects doesn't make one qualified lighting designer. And that, kind of ruffled the feather of the owner. And then he turned around and he said, well, I'm going to have to pay for your degree. And I said, absolutely, you're going to have to pay for it, because I did pay for it. I did spend, the 180,000, and I did spend 2 years in New York. And if you want my expertise, and specifically, if you want me to help you on this project, you're going to have to cough it in. Pay it up. So the reason why I'm saying that is because leadership begins with you. And if you are not, if you're not convinced that you are the right man for the job, then you are in a pretty bad situation to convince anybody else on the design team. And if you don't take your part as the leader of the lighting and bring everything so that you can bring your best game so you can bring the project to the end game, you will not be respected, and probably you won't be able to stay on that team because you'll be discarded at some point. And this is why I thought this episode was important, because even me, as a senior lighting designer, and with all the experience I have, all the education I have, I got booed out of a couple projects, and it was not because of my fault. It's because I didn't understand the ecosystem that lighting designer were in, and very rarely. Basically, it never happens now because it's a two-way communication flow. It's not only them that are testing me; it's me that are testing them too, because I know with what kind of people I want to work, and I hope they know with what kind of person they want to work, and it's a mutual agreement. And that's why lighting design is very often misunderstood, because if you cannot communicate to the team and they cannot communicate to the client, it becomes very difficult for them to do your job. And if you're not on top of your job, and if you're not on top of your, if you don't have your latest technology and you don't study and you don't listen to podcasts and you don't better yourself, well, very, very quickly you'll be obsolete. Very quickly. Because technology moves really fast. People talk among themselves. And like I told you about this little ecosystem that there is with manufacturers and architects and engineers and so forth, the information goes around faster than any other time. And now on top of that, we have AI. I mean, this is you know, the 10,000 feet is not there anymore. Now we're really, the battle is happening on the ground field, and it's happening really fast. So you become part of a system decision. You're not just a layer anymore. You need to be there. You need to be part of the decision. You need to be part of the creative process. You need to be in present time and there. And your job is not about fixtures, or it's not about lighting calculation, or it's about positioning yourself so that when anything can happen or is happening, not can, but it is happening, because a construction project, residential or commercial, is an organic living, and it has a life on its own. As the project evolves, that you are on top of it, and you can also be contributing, and you are contributing in real time. Because if you are a week late, 2 weeks late, a month late, you're out. Like you missed a lot of detail, and this is not what you want to do. And often, lighting designers, we're called on the job too late. We're called on the job, because there's a technical problem. We're called on a job because the manufacturer rep, didn't quite understand, or didn't came up with a proposal of money way too expensive. And now they say, well, let's get a lighting expert. Let's get a lighting designer. So there is different circumstance that we are called in or not. And this is why it's important to be in communication with your design team, so that you don't get into parts of the answer, or the value engineering that you bring in because you coordinated the electrical, the mechanical, you coordinated even the sprinkler, and all of this are very, very costly mistake if they're not caught at the beginning. So the team is going in a direction, and then the lighting is going in the other direction. This happens way too often, and it fails is not really because of the design. It fails because nothing is aligned, or your positioning was at the wrong time. Sorry. So you coming late on a project, the fire system's already been designed, the HVAC had already been designed, and you coming in and saying, well, we got to move this, we got to move that. It's kind of a backward step. And in job sites, people will say sometimes, well, it's also extra. So of course, there will be extra when you come late, and it should be also part of your dialogue when you are invited late on a project, to inform your client that I want you to be conscious, or I want you to be aware that I will be needing to relocate some ductwork. I will be needing to relocate some sprinkler system. I will be needing maybe to work with different strategy, because we have mechanical, structural, or electrical issue someplace. it could be really hard to bring electricity because there's a foundation wall, or there's a existing structure, or there's a space, or. So electrical architecture, engineering, they're all factors that you have to let your client aware that you coming into the job late will have impact. The lighting will have impact. Now, most people, most professional understand that. Clients, they do, but they don't. They pretend they don't. So you'll have to make sure that you're there and you're telling them. So where is the best place to position ourselves in this whole hierarchy? Well, definitely not under the electrician, because the electrician comes late. Uh, Not after the architecture, because again, all the engineering has been done, and you're going to come in and change stuff. And definitely not after the decorator, because yeah, everything went up the roof, and you don't want to be that person that comes and say, well, we got to do this, we got to put a layout of lighting fixtures, or we got to take that cove out, or we got to take that crown molding out because we want to have some recessed light on the perimeter, and so you want to be positioned between the architect and the client. This is where you want to be. Why? Because as the architect evolves and has the concept and the conversation evolve between the client and the architect, you're part of it. And also, you are contributing to the architecture because you understand. Most people don't understand in 3 dimension. Even if you show them a beautiful 3D rendering and you flip it around and you model and you show it, they see it, but the understanding is not the same. And it's very simple to understand because you're going to show them a 3D model, then you're going to bring them to the job site, and they're going to say, "Oh my God, this is so big." Yes, it is. And it was there from the beginning. Yeah, but I didn't understand and I didn't think, and what I'm telling you is not things that I read in books, is exercise and situation I had very commonly on different job sites. So basically, what do you do as a lighting designer? You're a translator. You're going to take the architecture and you're going to translate the lighting layers onto how it's going to happen and how it's going to reveal and how it's going to be in harmony with the project, how it's going to respect the design intent of the creative team, and most part of it what the client wants, because you'll be able to take some complicated terminology and make it very simple so that they can have a vision in their head or a visual reference. Sometimes I use theater play, sometimes I use concert, sometimes I use all kinds of imagery to have my client think about what the effect that I want to tell him that we're going to be recreating in the architecture. The other job that you have is that you're going to be also, as the lighting designer, the integrator. Meaning, well, now we have somebody that comes in with specific decorative parts. The client has an art collection. The wife of the client has a collection of shoes or a precious dress or jewelry. And you're going to be the one that, with all these details, have to put it in a hierarchy. Where are we going to put the money? How much money are we going to devote to that? How are we going to do it? How are we going to control it? Where is the lighting going to be? What kind of lighting? So you're going to be integrating all of these elements together. And now, the these days, what we have is we have the beautiful world of audio video. The world of audio video is another area of integration that lighting needs to be part of, and most people let it, like not most people, the electrician that were custodian of control for years, let it go to audio video integrator. And what's happening right now is that the audio video integrator come are come at the end. So you may have all your lighting done, and then they come at the end and they say, well, I can supply you with this, and I can do this, and why are you doing that? And then it becomes a little bit of disparity. So you being part of the project and there from the beginning, you can integrate and talk to those audio video guy, and then just make sure that your design intent is needed and wanted. And also, there's nothing worse than having a guy that's going to install a 70-inch TV in front of two recessed lights. And guess who's looking for who is the incompetent in that, in that scene? Is it the TV guy that put this TV under the two light, or the lighting designer that didn't predict that there would be a TV there, or didn't look, or didn't ask, or didn't know, and he did a nice wall wash, and then the AV integrator said, well, that's a good place to have a TV. Again, it is communication. It is way of integrating lighting, audio, video, sound, and etc., etc. Basically, your job is to protect the design intent, to make sure that every little details are sought after, and all this come to a price, okay? And I just want to give you a 10,000 feet overview of pricing. How do lighting designer price? What are the different options? And all in between there, you will find your own pricing. You will find your own way of evaluating what your worth is. And you will hear a lot of it. Sometimes I have fun and I go on ChatGPT and I ask. And you have two type of pricing. You have price per square foot, and price per square foot is very easy to sell. You have a 5,000 square feet, and you have a certain amount. You multiply by 5, and it's very easy to give a price. But it's very dangerous on the long term, because price per square foot put you into a production mode. If you do, I don't know, 100 condos and you give a price per square foot, I mean, there's a lot of cut and paste, and there's a lot of, maybe that's a good way of having a pricing. And maybe that's the kind of project you like. Maybe, this is what you're used to because you love that. Or you have a fee base. And a fee base, it's not about volume. It's about your value. How do you value your time? How much time do you want to spend with the client? And again, like I said at the beginning, what's happening is that you also have to decide if you want to enter in venture with this client, and if you want to, it's going to be a long relationship, because some project takes many years. Some are very fast, but some are very, very long. So, and there's no way of determining if this client is a good client or not, because gossips go nowhere. Client that talks about another, or contractors, and this goes nowhere. and this is not a way to evaluate, because your relationship with that client can be totally different. So you really have to decide and look at your value and look at the project. And if it talks to you and if it's something you really want to know, well, the fee base is always the best to go, because you are going phase by phase as the project is evolving. And you also have certain parameter to say, well, we'll have 2 revisions. And if you have a client that's going to do 10 revision, well, right off the bat, you can start talking and they're going to say, well, the last project, they'll never tell you that they're going to need 10 revision, but part of your proposal, you have, after 2 revision, there's a certain amount of money that will be charged. And then this is where you start to have a conversation and go deeper into your quote. And then you, as a strategic thinker, you start to understand if you want to keep going with that client or not. So again, this is not an easy process. This is not a one fit all. This is not a boilerplate template that you can go and apply to all your projects. Everything is case by case. And also the one thing you don't want to be labeled as is, he's my lighting drafter. He's gonna draft everything. No, you're not a technician. You're a designer, and your art is with lights. When I consider that, if I would do, because I don't, if I would do lighting by the square foot, I would probably treat myself as surface treatment. Why? Because there's not much thought that can go into something that I have pre-established. So if I go into a generic space and I need a certain amount of square foot and a square lumen per square foot, and I need a certain amount of, I have to respect a certain budget. This is where I think price per square foot would work for me, and for you, maybe totally different. And also and that brings me to the collaborative team, because I will not have the same collaboration, and I'm not going to spend the same time with the architect, with the interior designer. So the space, the finish, if I give a price per square foot, it is a price per square foot. I send my drawing to the engineers, and he's going to allocate the right power. He's going to make sure that it's up to code. And then the manufacturer is going to come in and the control. If there's a little bit of control, we're going to put it on a layer. And then, boom, to the developers or to the person, and it's done. They'll probably won't have any site visit. If they do, they're going to be, per visit, because it's very, it's hard to plan something you have no control. When you go on you're not per square foot, what happened is that you are part of the decision making. You are part of the detail. You are part of the family. And then when something happens, you are aware. You are part of the loop. You're part of the email chain. And then you can say, okay, well, I will go to that visit because everybody's there, and I want to make sure that I have the latest information. And sometimes I don't go. I will send my junior, and they come up with photos. They come up with notes. They come up. So that's where and I can judge by what kind of meeting, who I'm going to send, or if I'm going to show up, so that we all have a common language and everybody, plays in the same team. Um, Another thing that I realized that is is important, as a leader, is who's going to supply the material. For years, um, as an ethical point of view, I never supply any material. I never bought and resell, and and that was just the way I was trained, because I was part of the IALD, and that code of ethics always stuck with me. Even later, when I was not no longer a member, I still had that technical and that ethics in me. A couple of years ago, I found out that they changed the bylaw, and now designer can do like interior decorator. They can sell the lights. They can sell specific model. They tell the client. They take a percentage. So again, the game is changing, and it's getting, it adapts to the market, and my viewpoint on that is different from somebody else's viewpoint, but I never needed to sell anything to my clients, and because I was well paid, and it gave me also the objectivity to tell a supplier, no, I don't want your product, or you're going to change all this because this is not as per spec. When you have interest, or when you have financial gain into a project, you might be a bit more, how could I say that, influenceable, which sometimes the project may suffer or not. So you have designer that specify only. You have designer that supplies hybrid. I was working on a chain of, I was working as a fractional lighting designer, fractional, for a lighting design firm, and I was project managing a project in Montreal, and for them, and then uh, I received stuff under my name, and I was like, "Wow, why is it addressed to me?" Well, those were accessory that were going on certain lighting fixtures, and they were to be used when we do the final focus, when we do the final commissioning, and add as needed lenses, snoot, all of that. And those were provided by the lighting design firm and sold to the client directly. So we call this an hybrid stuff, hybrid model. And then there's those that, there were a couple of my friends that were manufacturers, and they would get the whole project, and they would design all the fixtures for that project. And they one of them in particular in Montreal was an extrusion company. They were making aluminum extrusion, and all their fixtures were made with extrusion. And and the beauty of this is that they all look kind of similar look. They had different size extrusion, so you had very high power wattage fixture with bigger extrusion. You had mini fixtures with MR16. You had six. So it was, for me, I thought it was brilliant because they had this design build capability. They could go from the front door to the back door and even outside. They even had exterior lighting fixture. So that gives them a certain control, but you have the limitation is that you're stuck to that design, and also you have full responsibility on everything. So and then you got to work and protect your integrity, make sure that nobody else and so there's some good thing about this, and then there's also other things. Uh, Fashion trends change. People get, they want the latest thing, and at some point, if you don't evolve, and we'll talk about that in the industry in the coming weeks about manufacture, how they have to constantly innovate and bring new products and so forth. It's pretty it's a big challenge to follow up and keep going. Now, how do how does lighting integrate into all of this? Well, first of all, we have to follow the architecture, right? So, working with the architect, we know that A, B, and C has to be in the hierarchy, the lobby, or the main entrance, or the exterior, or. And then um, we have certain preconceived idea that lighting must follow the the ceiling system. And as a lighting designer, I am not too good with that. Um, if I do a general lighting layers and I'm in a commercial situation, I will probably respect that. If I'm in a residential area and I work at different layers and I need to do a general lighting, I will 90% of the time never do a lighting grid of for general lighting. I'd rather do something else. I'd rather do have more power on my perimeter lighting. I'd rather do a couple nice general lighting fixtures. I'd rather do some nice floor lamps, so that I don't have to and I don't have to impose on my project a grid ceiling, which I think sometimes it destroys the beauty of a beautiful ceiling or a beautiful architecture. And of course, then I will also coordinate with the AC. And this is where a lot of people and are how could I say that? They feel powerless. But when you talk to your client and when you're with the architect and you start talking about AC, they first of all they're a little surprised. They say, well, what are going to be the diffuser? And then you start talking about it, and there's no reason why they would be in the middle of the ceiling. No reason at all. So most 90% of the time you can hide them on the side. You can put them on the side of, and the architect will look at you first and they'll be like, wow. And this is where I gain a lot of popularity because I have no problem talking to the AC people or to talk to the client about something that will affect the final result. Because at final, I'm going to be there and looking at these diffuser that are 10 feet long in the middle of a ceiling that I work my butt out to keep the integrity. And that's the HVAC. Nobody saw this, as I was telling you about 3D earlier. Nobody saw that there would be a problem there, right? Till the end, till it's done. But I did, and I didn't tell anyone. Well, the owner is never gonna make me responsible for it because it's not my job. But he will surely appreciate that at the beginning, I tell him that if we take these diffuser and we put them along the wall, later, when we are at finishing, he's not going to have these huge opening in the middle of the ceiling. And I take the HVAC because they're easy target, but I can say the same thing with speakers. I can say the same thing with alarm system. I can say the same thing for, there's so many ceiling acne that we can eliminate just by coordinating the meeting with the different professional and explaining to everybody that, at the end, we're all working to get a beautiful product. We're all working to get this, into our portfolio. And no, we don't want to have a smoke detector in the middle of the ceiling. And there's no way that the code says it has to be in the middle. It says it has to be whatever. But this, and we can cheat and bring it there. We don't need to put it right in the middle. So that being said, same thing for walls. I'm allergic to wall plate, switch, wall acne, thermostat, security, and now with the screen it gets even worse because now you have this beautiful, environment that it's all nice and soft, and then you have this projector that's on that TV that's on the wall, which has a screen, and nobody thought about talking to the audio video guy and tell him to put maybe a fader after 10 minutes or use less of the blue and more of the cold color and more of the warm color in the screen front for that particular room. So all of this integration and all of it's just part of leadership, and it's your job. And if you foresee something and you know it's going to be not point, well, it's your job to talk about it and tell your clients and tell your friends and tell your team that, hey, listen, maybe having the garage too close to the bedroom is not a good idea. Why? Well, the owner drives a Ferrari, and I don't know. If it's a good idea that you arrive with your Ferrari at 3 o'clock in the morning while you're sleeping, and you hear it roaring, right in your bedroom. And trust me, it happened to me on a project. So let's take the lead and don't be afraid. And the worst that can happen is that the client says, no, this is how it's going to stay. But don't forget, they're going to be there for, I'm not saying forever because it's not really a term, but they're going to be there for a long time. And they will appreciate that you put that thought and ask the question. Because sometimes everybody's caught on the spirit of the moment. We're all cut into all kinds of stuff that's happening at the same time. And somebody that has a 10,000 feet view comes in and say, hey, guys, look, this is going to happen. Oh, we didn't see that. We didn't see it that way. Thank you. Or we said, yeah, we know. That's fine. Okay, good. It's fine. It's fine. So when is the best time for a lighting designer? Definitely not during the construction, because right now things are happening. Everybody's everybody's following a direction, and we have a timeline, and we got a boogie. So construction is a big no-no. So and once the plans are done, it's the same thing. Lighting designers, that a few that I know, they get a set of plan after everything is done, and you're like, and worse, they send me a plan with a layer of light already, and they say, oh, this is just for permit. I mean, it blows my mind. I'm like, wow. So the ideal is when you're there pre-concept at the beginning with the schematic, with the architect and the client, and you start putting stuff on paper right away. And like I said, in the first and second episode, when we start to talk about concept, it's very, very simple after to move to fixtures and so we start talking about concept and ideas, and then we grow with it. We know there's going to be change. We know that walls are going to be added. Some are going to be taken out. The geometry is going to change. The budget is fluid because now it's time to say, well, ChatGPT told you it would be $40 per square foot for lighting, and in reality, it could be more like 150. And then you go, what? Well, again, what I'm seeing here and what you need is not the low end stuff. and maybe they want to go to Home Depot. Well, fine. Then you're out. Well, I'm out. Maybe you're gonna stay and design with Home Depot fixture and have a session with the owner shopping at Home Depot for their lights. This is not me, but it happens every day. So the idea is to be there when the vision is there, and before we enter into drawing, so that we can start to put the concept, elaborate, and we don't create compromise. So basically, we don't have to change major thing. Client wants a dome in the entrance, and he wants indirect lighting. Good. We give him his dome. After that, everybody came in, and then they ran the HVAC, and they did this, and they did that, and then they say, well, we'd like to light up this dome. Might be a little bit more tricky and a bit more work, certainly way more money, because you have to do something after the fact that was not thought for. So, exactly. So ideally, you get in at concept, then we jump to schematic, and then we start doing the design development. Most of the documentation is also happening, but then you go into procurement, so that we start getting pricing. Then construction start, and then you start making orders and all of that, and at last, when everybody leave and the place is clean, now we start talking about commissioning. And when we do the commissioning, well, again, commissioning, we're there with the AV people, and we tell them this is how we want it. This is the scene we want. And then we bring the client. What do you like this? I found my best success is to define the scene before the client see them. Because if you sit down with the client and try to create a scene, then the wife arrives, or the wife is there, then the husband arrives, and the conversation becomes limitless. And it becomes crazy, and then you start having all these emotion happening, not really good. If you have, when you had when you designed the original intent, you had an idea of what would be, the scene. What you do is you prepare it, you sit down with your AV guy, you say, okay, I need this zone at 50%, this zone 90%, this is 100%, this is off, this is scene one. Scene two, what was off now is 100%, everything else is dim, and so forth. And then you pre-build them. Then you bring the clients in and you said, well, this is the welcome scene. This is the lunch scene. This is the dinner scene. This is the party scene. And then the client said, wow, this is very confusing. You said, no, it's not. You have 3 buttons on the wall. You have the welcome, dinner, and good night scene. Now, when you have a party, you take your phone and there's an app, and then you go into your party, and then you scroll, and this is Christmas, this is Valentine, this is Halloween, this is St. Patrick, and then everything that we program is related to that, the color, the movement, the whatever. If you want to have a party, a disco party every night, well, that's it. You can do that. Or if you're doing a workout in your gym, you press the first button will be lights on, second button will be workout, because this is something you do every night or every morning at 5 a.m. And the stimulation of the light, helps you to go through your workout, and you time it for 20 minutes, and when the light starts go back to white, your workout is finished. This is where leadership is important. And this is where having communication, being in constant communication with the owner, gives you the power to put into reality the wildest dream and whatever. Whew. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about the industry and about seminars and all that cool stuff. So thank you for being there. Thank you for supporting me, and I'll see you tomorrow.